to Market Overtime on Schwab Network. I'm Diane King Hall. There's no denying the Taylor Swift effect, from the record-breaking Eras Tour to her latest album, The Life of a Showgirl. She's moving charts, so much so that even the Fed has taken note of her economic impact. So what does this Swiftonomics moment mean for investors in the music business or who want to get exposure there? Joining me now is David Schulhof, CEO and founder of the MUSQ ETF, a fund that gives investors exposure across the global music ecosystem. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Diane.
All right, so let's jump into this. I want to get to your ETF, but let's talk a little bit about the effect of Swiftonomics, right? You talk about that effect. You call live concerts the heartbeat of the music business. So just talk to me about the effect of Swiftonomics when you think about that effect on the music industry.
Yeah, well, first with Taylor Swift, if you look at the Eras Tour, you know, she had a massive halo effect on many different industries, obviously across music, but also hospitality, transportation, merchandising. I think she generated alone $5 billion to the economy. So she was moving mountains with the Eras Tour. And also, you know, Beyonce with the Cowboy Carter Tour wasn't really far behind. I think between the two of them, it was like $8.5 billion. So look, you have fans that want to dress like Taylor or dress like Beyonce, yes, want to wear their clothes, want to wear their jeans, want to wear their boots. They want to travel, you know. So it had a massive impact on the economy. And look, it's not just Taylor, it's Taylor and Beyonce. I think the two of them have had a huge impact on many different industries.
It's so wild that you mentioned that, because I see, like, you know, on social media, friends and beyond making posts of all the things they buy to go to these different concerts and events. They've turned into like big experiences, because you're not just buying the ticket for the event, which are costly, and we'll get into that in a moment, but all the paraphernalia around it, like you mentioned, the boots, or, you know, some kind of glittery, showy outfit, and you think about Life of a Showgirl. Are we going to see some more of that effect? To me, it creates this kind of ripple effect of like when you throw a rock out in the water and it spreads.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, so look, I think the Life of a Showgirl is going to be a massive tour. Taylor Swift has not announced anything about that. But, you know, look, you have very rabid fans, the Swifties. Look what she did with the album release last week. She had 32 different versions of the album. One album version had like jewelry in it. One album version had like little sneak conversations to her fans in it. There was obviously vinyl, right? So if you were a fan, you just had to scoop everything up just to own a piece of it. So she's really reinventing the wheel around marketing, around sales, and she's really trying to attack it from many different angles.
It's so interesting that what you mentioned about reinventing the wheel around marketing, or even going back to some old formats, because you mentioned vinyl. I also even think about the viral moments with Cardi B recently, where she's going around hawking CDs on the subway, which seems so wild to me, because we've had so many different iterations of, you know, how music arrives, right? From, you know, vinyl to tapes to CDs to just streaming.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that about Cardi B. So first, you always want to have street marketing teams. You never want to forget who your core audience is, right? So you have to go right to the street, and then you can move up and kind of cross over into your, you know, popular fans that may or may not be buying your music. But I think today there are so many different ways to market and promote an album. I think, you know, Taylor's just an example of someone who's reinventing the wheel. I mean, look, Beyonce has been incredibly innovative. Her documentary, you know, was up for so many Emmys, you know, the Cowboy Carter Tour. So, look, I think all these artists today, it's a show, right? Yeah. And they're creating albums in the context of what could be an amazing tour, what could be amazing performances, amazing music, you know. So I just think a lot's going on today. Obviously, you know, streaming is really important, but live music has become even a bigger windfall for artists. Because look, as it relates to streaming is like pennies compared to what you can make on tour, you know.
And so when you think about, you know, the industry and where a lot of the revenue is generated, you mentioned the tours. I'm thinking now about Bad Bunny and his massive tour that's happening. He's going to be appearing in the Super Bowl. How does all of that fit into the ecosystem of investing? And I know that, you know, and I want to get to your ETF as well, because, you know, you get exposure to different things through that. So how does that all kind of, how do you assess all of that as an from an investor perspective?
Okay, so I think, look, I think at its core you have three different revenue drivers in music today, right? So you have streaming, you have content, which consists of music publishing and recorded music, and you have live music events and ticketing. So you have companies like Spotify, right, and Tencent Music, and Apple, Amazon, and Google on the streaming side. You have obviously Universal Music Group and Taylor Signer Republic, which is owned by Universal, but you also have Warner Music Group, you have Sony, you have all the K-pop companies. And then on the live music events and ticketing side, you obviously have leaders like, you know, Live Nation, but you also have Sphere, which has had like an incredible year in Las Vegas with tours from, you know, U2 and Kenny Chesney and John Mayer. So I think you can invest in any of these, or you can invest broadly across all of them with our fund.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about your fund, and just catch people up for who aren't as familiar what they get exposure to in the music ETF. That's MUSQ.
Correct.
And it's up more than 20% year to date, so it's outperforming the S&P 500, which has honestly made an incredible recovery. The S&P 500, but again, the ETF outperforming. What are investors getting exposure to in that world?
Yeah. So first, I've been in the music industry, Diane, for over 25 years. I was the head of music for Miramax and Dimension Films for many years. I had a private equity-backed company called Evergreen. We owned all the rights from Bill Monroe to Death Row. Taylor Swift was actually signed to one of my companies when she was 15 as a writer, so I've been exposed to her and working with her for a long time. And about 2 years ago, I wanted to give retail investors total global exposure to the music industry, because right now you have to be an LP at like one of these big private equity firms. So I launched MUSQ in July of 2023. We are the first pure play music exchange traded fund investing across streaming and content and live music events and ticketing and equipment and technology. About half the companies are domestic and half the companies are foreign, and it's really a very convenient way to invest in all the different sectors of the music industry. It's a very uncorrelated product. It's not really impacted by tariffs, and look, music is growing at a double-digit pace. It's growing at 15 to 20% in the emerging markets, as high as 50% in some other markets, and it's just performing very well.
When you think about, so you mentioned the international component of the ETF. Did you lean toward, was there a theme in terms of proven entities, or was it about disruptors as well?
No, I really wanted to capture the global industry. So we have all the K-pop companies, and K-pop's obviously.
K-pop's having a huge moment. Yes,
massive. So you have so many companies from Hybe to JYP, and they're launching careers, from Blackpink to Monsta X. Now they actually have huge investments in the U.S. business. They own all the management companies. They bought like Scooter Braun's company, which owned the rights to Ariana Grande and Justin Bieber. But there are companies in Taiwan, in China, all across Western Europe, now in India, in Africa. So, there are so many companies out there today, it's really hard to decide and pick and choose which ones to invest in, and we just make it easy to invest in all of them.
I'm curious to know, given all of your perspective and years in the industry, where talent comes from now, where one finds talent, and is that also even part of what drives performance in each of the sectors within the ETF? Is it about the musician?
You really raise an interesting topic, Diane, because AI has become such an important topic today. And can AI replace talent? And the short answer is no. Okay, because AI can't tour. Right? You need a hit song and you need a hit album. And to have a hit song, you need a great song, you need a great performance, and you need a recording of it. You need those. It's like a three-legged stool. You need those three pieces, right? But then you need an artist to actually go on tour and tell the story, right? And if the artist can't tell the story, then it's not believable, right? And then the live music side of it, people want to go out and see shows, and so that's what you need. There's so much that goes into making a hit song. You can have something that's catchy and viral, but it'll have no life after that, after it becomes viral.
I'm so glad you brought up the AI component of this, because I don't think of AI as foe. I don't know if I'd categorize it as friend yet, but I think AI has its use. But I've seen some people create, basically, for lack of a better way of calling it characters, right? And saying they can create a whole music video of this. They just create, we'll call it Taylor Swift or whatever. It's a new artist and they'll have this catchy beat, but you make a great point. how can they tour, you know? And that's one of the draws for people, to see these people live, up close and personal, to hear about their personal lives. Because as you mentioned, knowing Taylor back when she was 15, the thought came to my mind, what was she like when she was 15? You know?
Yeah, she was like, look, she was extremely talented. We used to publish all her songs from her first album, like Teardrops on My Guitar. But she was just a force, and you know, a very talented writer who was writing all the time, and nothing's really changed today. I mean, she's writing all the time. And I think with superstars like Taylor to Bruce Springsteen, they're just writing all the time, composing different ideas all the time. But AI cannot replace that, right? AI can't tell the story about where you're from.
Right.
You know, AI doesn't have a touring component to it, so it's not believable. You can have a fake artist, but there's, again, where are you from? Like, what are your issues in politics? It's not believable. So, and if you read the Goldman Sachs report, AI has very little impact on the industry today.
And I'll get into that in just a moment, because I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, because a lot of that's like analysis. But you make a good point, because I know sometimes people will follow a particular artist or, you know, celebrity, and there will be things that we hear about them, and someone will say, they can never make me hate you, right? Because, you know, something may come up in their past, but it adds a layer of complexity to who that person is, and even can contribute to, you know, just the soul, for instance, in their music. When you think about, I want to go back to your ETF, when you think about the performance there, you mentioned K-pop, for instance, and, you know, it's not, you know, the beta is not closely correlated, for instance, to the S&P 500. What do you think has been driving the performance, the outperformance? Is it about that global exposure? Is it live events, or is it, or streaming, or is it some mix of all of the above?
Yeah, well, if you look at our top holdings today, Spotify, Live Nation, Universal Music Group, Tencent Music Group, Yamaha, it's really across all the different verticals, right? It's all the way from, you know, equipment and technology, all the way to streaming and content and live music. So look, Spotify's obviously been a very winning, had a great run. It's up almost 150%, and those numbers are going to continue to grow. I mean, there are about 800 million paid streaming subscribers. They're expected to double to 1.6 billion, you know, by 2030, if you read the Goldman Sachs report. So look, earnings are right around the corner, we'll see. But also, music's very cheap and very under-monetized today. Remember, for $11.99, that's like half of what you pay for Netflix and HBO Go. So I think you're going to see all these streaming companies continue to raise rates. We think music is a very compelling, under-monetized investment opportunity. I think that's why it's performing so well. It's cheap. People are finally waking up like, hey, music is really big, and it's too big to ignore. We better own this or put a piece of this in our portfolio.
How durable do you see that growth of it, you know, or a continuation of that trend through 2026, for instance?
Yeah. So again, if you read like the Music in the Air report, right, and that's the top industry report, it's growing at recorded music's growing at 10 to 15% in the U.S. It's growing as high as 25% to 50% in the emerging markets. Live music events and ticketing are up 10 times from COVID. That's going to continue to grow. And paid streaming subscribers are going from 800 million to 1.6 billion. The industry today is about 100 billion, going to 200 billion. So we're expecting double revenue growth, you know, over the next 5 to 7 years.
Let me ask you, you mentioned Spotify's earnings coming up. We also have Universal Music, Live Nation coming up. What metrics are you watching most closely for?
So Spotify, obviously you're looking at, you know, monthly active users, but more importantly, paid subscribers, right? Well, today they're around 270 million. Will they grow 10%, 15%, 5%? So we'll look at paid streaming subscribers. For Live Nation, obviously we're going to look at revenue. This was a massive summer, right? You had everything from Bad Bunny to SZA and Kendrick Lamar. You had Coldplay, you had Beyonce. Every single artist toured in 2025 with the exception of Taylor Swift. So I think all of those revenues are starting to pour in for Live Nation. And then, look, Universal, you're going to look to see, you know, new releases, right? Taylor may not be fully represented in Q3 for Universal, more likely Q4, but it was a huge year of album releases for Universal, and so we're going to look to see how that had an impact on its stock.
And Coldplay had a moment that was beyond music. That became a very viral moment. Yeah. Wink, wink. All right, let's get back to that Goldman Sachs report that you talked about, the projection that the global music market could double by 2035. So what do you see as the drivers of that growth story there?
Yeah, so it's paid streaming subscribers. Well, that number is expected to double. We're going to see if they raise rates. They generally, companies like Spotify are raising rates by 10% every quarter. We're going to look at companies like Live Nation. They've announced that they're doubling their output for shows for 2026. We're going to look at how all the record companies are performing, how all the music publishing companies are performing. We're going to look at all these new album releases and look at streams. So our fund, Diane, really is in line with this Goldman Sachs report. It really captures the growth and innovation around the music industry globally.
You say the music industry is tariff-proof. And so I guess technically speaking it is, but is there the potential for a broader impact when you think about, just the cost of tickets to attend a concert, right? If you're paying tariffs on the Christmas gifts and whatnot, because nobody's giving up Christmas, can you still afford to buy that concert ticket en masse, right?
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
So look, streaming I think is cheap, right? $11.99. That's not going away. I think consumers will pay more. But look, live music events and ticketing, that has gone up. I mean, it's gone up for a lot of reasons, right? It's gone up from the secondary and tertiary markets around reselling, around StubHub and SeatGeek. So that's made that. Look, the face value of an average Taylor Swift ticket on like the Eras Tour was like $220, and it was as high as like $2,000 in like New York and other in Pennsylvania. So we need to do something about getting tickets in line so all families can buy 4 tickets for their kids or 6 tickets. So something needs to get done. It's become unaffordable. But having said that, it doesn't look like that's stopping anybody from buying tickets.
I know, because it seems like, people aren't giving up their experiences, because there's a trend, obviously, that started during COVID, like that revenge spending trend, right? And it was, people were spending on experiences, right? A lot of that had to do with travel, but also the experiences like the concert. And so it seems like people aren't willing to give that up. But then you wonder, again, it goes back to the question of, will people have to give that up if they have to, because you think of, like, you'll have to start making choices, right? So it's not letting up anytime soon, but what's the straw that breaks the camel's back when you make the choice between you want to fly somewhere, because $200 is the cost of a plane ticket, a cheaper plane ticket, but it's the cost of a plane ticket.
Well, let me put something in perspective for you, Diane. 25 years ago, okay, people spend 10 times what they're spending today in music.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to,
So if you look at the average revenue spend, okay, 25 years ago, they were buying 4, 5, 6 CDs, right? It was basically 10% of the entertainment household. 10% of entertainment was,
CDs? I don't remember.
Yeah, they were like $20. Right, so if they bought, so $20 or $30, if they bought 5, 6, or 7 of them, that was like $200, and then, they wound up accumulating, merch and all kinds of. The point is, today you have, for $120 a year, $10 a month, you have 200 million songs. You're spending a lot less to own music today than you did 25 years ago. That's a fact. Ticket sales for concerts have gone up exponentially. That I agree with. Yeah.
Okay, and so do you think at some point, especially when you think about like the secondary markets or even tertiary markets, there will be some pullback on pricing because of resistance to pay those prices at some point at all?
Yeah, there has to be. In fact, the FTC just filed a lawsuit against Ticketmaster for that. So they filed a lawsuit that Ticketmaster was violating the Bots Act, right? And what I mean by that is you have bots that were actually buying tickets from Ticketmaster at face value and then reselling them on SeatGeek and StubHub, and Live Nation, which owns Ticketmaster, was profiting from every sale, right? They were taking fees, and none of this was transparent. So I think, look, when Trump came into office, you saw Kid Rock standing next to him. They want to make tickets affordable. They want to stop price gouging. Something needs to get done there. So you have, this is substantial, by the way. It's something like $53,000 per infringement. I mean, it could be billions of dollars in fines, which could cripple Ticketmaster. I don't think it'll get that far, but something needs to get done to bring tickets in line. We can't allow these bots to continue to buy face value tickets for $100 and then sell them up for $2,000, and just passing it along to the consumer. So I think something needs to get done right there. And then separately, the Department of Justice has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Live Nation for being too big. So I think something needs to get done here.
What do you see as the broader impact of that legal overhang, especially when you think about, for instance, Live Nation?
Yeah, well, look, the Department of Justice clearly would like to see those two companies broken up, right? They don't think that venue market should also be, you know, the promoter, right? So the company that's selling the tickets, owning the venue, should not be also the company, you know, it's, well, they're controlling everything. It's monopoly, right? That's like classic antitrust 101. And so they'd like to see that broken up. But they've been after this for many years, right? And Live Nation keeps pushing back. I think a more realistic short-term solution is to stop the reselling of tickets, right? And to hold Live Nation accountable for when tickets get bought by bots and then resold on some of these secondary markets. And I think that's really the problem right there. Things are moving very quickly. Algorithms are, they're setting up dummy accounts, buying tickets and reselling them. We need to put an end to that. There's no reason why you should have to pay $8,000 to take, you know, your husband and your 2 kids to a tail. That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And let me ask you this. You mentioned, we've talked obviously about Spotify. Spotify has had a great year. People aren't giving up their streaming subscriptions to Spotify. Where does Apple Music fit in all of this? Does it?
Yeah. So Apple Music today is the 3rd largest streaming company in the world, right? It's still a small part of their overall, it's part of their services business. So number 1, Spotify, number 2 is Tencent, number 3 is Apple. They have 110 million paid streaming subscribers. Very important part of the ecosystem for Apple Music, but it's really almost a carrot to get people to buy phones and to get people to buy ancillary products. So it is in our fund. We do include Apple because it's hard to ignore them. In fact, we also include YouTube Music, we include Amazon Music, also in our fund, and all the K-pop companies that are involved in streaming. So we want to give investors exposure to that. They are still a part of the economic business, but if you look at the companies in our fund, you know, 80% are all pure play companies, only 20% are non-pure play or diversified companies. And Apple and Amazon and Google, I would consider obviously non-pure play companies, but they are an important part of the streaming system.
David, let me ask you this. For 2026, when you look out to 2026, what do you see as the themes in the music industry? Is it going to be about more live concerts, these big event experiences or experience events like Taylor Swift, like a Beyonce? What do you see?
Yeah, so look, I think 2026 will be another big year for tours. Right? I think it'll be a big year for Latin music. It's amazing that Bad Bunny was picked to, you know, he's performing all of his songs in Spanish.
I know.
Right?
We're all going to have to bone up on our Spanish.
Listen, Latin music is the fastest growing music genre today in this country. I think we're going to see more releases from, you know, J Balvin and Bad Bunny and, you know, a lot of different J-Lo, all in Spanish. So I think that's going to be big for 2026. We're going to see more Spanish tours. And then we're going to see, you know, we'll see with all these other popular artists what they're doing. So that's obviously going to be big. I think AI will be front and center also in 2026. We have to do something, Diane, just around piracy and market saturation. The big issue today in this country is that you have no federal copyright protection in your voice. So should we allow all these algorithms, all these companies like ChatGPT, to train their algorithms to have fake AI music sound like Bad Bunny or Taylor Swift or Beyonce? So something needs to get done. So we need there are bills before Congress that I hope the president passes into law that make it a crime. And I don't think that these algorithms should be allowed to, you know, take the voice, the lifeblood of an artist and make up fake music.
No, that's a great point, because especially because things are, you know, getting so confusing when you look online, and it can sound just like that artist, just like that individual, you know, what we were calling deep fakes once upon a time. Now it's in the realm of generative AI, and so it really blurs the line between what is creative expression, what is creative licensing, what is artistic licensing. So there does need to be some guardrails. So I want to ask you a final thought on also looking out into 2026. Are there any music acts or, you know, things within the industry that you're particularly excited about, especially like, for instance, you mentioned K-pop, and, you know, it's very popular with young people.
Yeah, K-pop's, the thing with K-pop is, like, it's coming out, there are many fewer artists. I mean, all the big companies only have like 4 to 6 artists. So I think we're going to look out to see, when is the next Blackpink tour, when is the next Monsta X tour. So I think, they're very selective as opposed to Universal and Warner. I mean, they have hundreds of releases every quarter. So we're going to look at internationally. Look, I like to see, what is going to come out of Taiwan, what's going to come out of China, what's going to come out of India. Can we get a really cool, artist from Africa, I think that's really, what's interesting. Like, let's figure out, how do we identify some of these new genres coming in from some of the emerging markets? Look, we've obviously heard a lot from Taylor and Beyonce, so I hope that we get from a lot of international music. Personally, I'm really into like Americana music today. Like, I took my daughter and her friends to see Tyler Childers. I don't know if you know who he is.
I heard that name.
He's like, there's Zach Bryan, right? And then right behind Zach, there's like this guy from Kentucky who I love, and I saw him at Forest Hills, and look, they're great. It's like banjos and mandolin. It's country, but it's also pop, and they perform well. So again, it comes down to a live performance. Like, if you see a band and it's got great music, where can you go see that artist perform? So I just love like real musicianship, and to me, Tyler is an example of one.
All right, our thanks to David Schulhof. He is the founder and CEO of the MUSQ ETF. That does it for this edition of Market Overtime. For more market coverage, be sure to subscribe to Schwab Network's YouTube channel. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and at schwabnetwork.com. I'm Diane King Hall. Thank you for watching.